Readers Entertainment Radio presents Booklights with your host, author Lisa Kessler. Booklights, where we're shining a light on good books.
Why, hello, everyone. If you're listening from the United States, happy Memorial Day. I hope you guys are staying safe. This is a weird holiday weekend this year. Most of us are staying inside and doing our part. So anyway, everyone be safe wherever you are. And I'm so glad you're with us because today we have Stephen Parolini on. He is not only a fantastic writer, but he's also an amazing editor. And if you have not read him before, let me read his bio and we'll let you meet him. So Stephen Parolini is a full-time freelance editor and a writer who shares his small Colorado apartment with his granddaughter and an assortment of imaginary characters. He's the author of the novel Beautiful Sky, Stolen Things, and the short story collection Duck and Other Stories. You can find Stephen on the web in two locations at once. While it sounds like alchemy, it's really just technology. You can find out more about his books at his website, steveparolini.com, and I did put a link to that on the Blog Talk site. So if you're listening live, go ahead and click over there. You can see all the books. And then if you want to find out about his day job as a freelance editor, I did put a link to the Novel Doctor on Blog Talk, so you can click that too and check that out. So without any further delay, Stephen, are you there?
I am here.
All right. So glad to have you with us. And you're in Colorado, right? Middle of the country.
Middle, well, I guess they call it sort of the West, which always was strange to me, but it's in the middle of the West.
Yeah, and how are things over there? Are you guys all pandemic locked down, or are you guys starting to come out?
There's some changes to the laws about, what restaurants can open, what they can do. They're following fairly strict guidelines, I think. I don't know. We stay home, so it's pretty easy to just order food in, or make our own.
Right.
That's what we do. And we go outside, get some air when we can, but we like to be mask wearers here.
Yes, we are definitely mask wearers over here. I feel like as writers, we've been training for this moment.
Yeah, both the isolation and the strangeness.
Yes, right? So you have a new book out, Beautiful Sky. Can you tell our listeners what it's about and why they need it now?
Well, why they need it now? Because we like to read. It's a story essentially of an intersection of two characters. Well, three actually. The main character being a high schooler, David Tinker, who's kind of a disaffected, sort of doesn't care anymore, senior, just wants to get out of school and be done. Has a bit of an attitude. He's the character we all knew in high school as the person who was kind of a bully, but too smart to be a bully. And it's his story, and it's also the story of a character who is his choir director, which comes into play about halfway through the book. And it's a story of sort of, can you overcome your family of origin? That's kind of the bottom line of the story.
Do you find that's a theme in a lot of the things that you write, or was this something new for you to tap into?
Well, the themes that seems to recur in my writing is overcoming loss, which is a big part of this story too. It's, for some reason, that's just where I live. I live in the melancholy. And so a lot of the characters deal, well, it's real life. And I think that as teenagers, and this goes back, it's set in 1980. So it's technically a historical novel, which makes me feel very old.
You made me feel old too, dude.
I mean, I graduated before then, so this is set after I actually graduated from high school slightly. But I think teenagers are dealing with self and understanding who they are and trying to figure out the world around them while also navigating their family of origin, their future possibilities. There's so much going on. And then, as we get older, I think that some of those same things, they never really go away. They just take different shape. And so it's kind of a story, and I think a lot of my stories are like this, stories about coming of age and also growing older. So they sort of intersect in a way. And I think that's true of certainly the short story collection and this one, and somewhat true of Stolen Things, the last book.
And in this book, so I'm assuming that since there's a choir director, is there a lot of music in the book?
Yeah, it's a very music-centric, centric isn't the right word. Music plays a big role in David's life. He's in the choir. He chose it because it was an easy grade to graduate with. Take that and get the credits he needs and graduate. But he's a great singer, and he just doesn't really know it. That self-esteem thing comes into play a lot through the story. But in 1980, there was a lot of significant musical occurrences. So it just seemed like a good time to set it. Music was interesting and changing dramatically during that time. And there are a lot of musical references. In fact, I need to put together like a Spotify or an Apple Music playlist so people can listen along as they read. It covers quite a variety from classical to the rock of the day and everything in between.
That's so cool. Were you into choir when you were in high school?
I was. So, like most novels, there's some elements of truth from my story in there too.
Right.
I was in choir, and I love music. I grew up with progressive rock. That was my thing. The Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the Genesis, and Yes, and those bands were my favorite. Which kind of makes sense because I grew up in a household that was very much into classical music and church music, and there's some interesting similarities between those kinds. You have that music is complex, just like human life is complex, and I think that's why I gravitated toward it.
Yeah, I love that. So when I was poking around on your website and looking at your books, it looks like you do everything that publishers tell you not to, that you need to pick a genre and stay there, but you seem to write a little bit of everything. And so I thought, is there a genre you're thinking about that you haven't tried yet?
I'm sure there are a lot. I have a list. I mean, I have a whole bunch of files scattered around my computer in various locations I'll never be able to find again, where I have book ideas that were intended to be the next big thing that I write. I just write whatever feels like I want to write. I mean, the first one was sort of by design. I wanted to write something because I work with a lot of freelance authors who self-publish. And I thought, well, I need to self-publish something so I understand more of what they go through in that process. So I wrote a short story, which turned into a novelette, and then more recently updated it to a novella. It graduated, got slightly larger with a couple more chapters. But the design, and then I added some short stories to it. I mean, that was just to see kind of how it worked, but it was a story about that spanned a number of years in a character's life of a strange occurrence that happens to him and how he sort of deals with it. And really turns out to be something I enjoyed writing. And so I want to write some more stories. And I started the next one a few years later, and that came after reading Neil Gaiman's Ocean at the End of the Lane. I read that book and thought, I need to write again. It just inspired me to write. And so I wrote that story, and it was kind of somewhat, magical realism is something that I like to live in, but I don't know that I'm actually there. I write stories that could be, fantastical. They could also be just imagination that we don't know. And I kind of like that uncertainty in the story, not knowing what's real, what's imagined, because that's kind of where we live, and certainly more so as we're locked down too. We're doing a lot of stuff in our heads.
Right.
Yes, so that's where I write whatever it's going to be. I don't, I chased traditional publishing a little bit with Stolen Things and also with this most recent one, just to kind of test the water, see if there was interest. But I know I write for kind of a strange audience of people who are maybe young adults, maybe adults, maybe all of them. I'm not very focused in my marketing efforts. They're all over the place because I don't really want to limit it for one, but also it's not really written to one group. Yes, this protagonist of the current book is a high school kid, but it's set in 1980. So, I mean, how many people who are high school kids today know anything about 1980? It probably is as much for the adult who lived through that as it is for the teenager who's that same age. Right.
Yeah. But that not to compare you to someone huge, but it reminds me of, Stephen King, where there's these stories that are high school age kids or even younger, but the story is definitely not for kids. It's for adults who remember being that age,
Yeah, and I follow the characters. I meet the characters usually first, and then they tell me what the story is they want to tell. And for this one, it was actually an intersection of two completely different ideas. How they turned into a story, I couldn't tell you, but they did. It was thinking back to high school days, and a friend of mine who was in the choir, who sort of inspired the main character. He was much nicer in real life than the character is in the book, but it was the beginning of an idea. Here's someone who didn't really want to be in high school, was kind of always poking fun at people and had a bit of an attitude. And I wondered about what his home life might be, so I started to create a character inspired by him. And then on the other side of things, my dad, who at the time when I started writing this was suffering from about the third or fourth year of dementia, the kind where he has no short-term memory, or plenty of long-term memory. You could ask him about friends from family from long ago. He could tell you everything about them. He'd start singing songs, play the piano, whatever. But if you ask him what he said 5 minutes ago, he wouldn't remember. So we would drive up to his favorite restaurant, Red Lobster, and on the way there, he'd look out the window and he'd say, "Oh, what a beautiful sky. Have you ever seen such a beautiful sky?" And then 3 minutes later, he'd look out as if seeing it for the brand new first time again. What a beautiful sky. And I thought there's something almost hopeful in that. I mean, his dementia was very, positive, and he was a kind-hearted person, and that just played out in the way that he sort of repeated things. And so as my mom was struggling and taking care of him and trying to figure out, well, he just repeats himself all the time. What do we do? It's so frustrating. I said, well, yeah, I get that. You just have to endure it, but also consider that maybe there's some joy in the fact that he can see this beautiful sky anew 5-6 times on a drive 10 miles down the road.
Right.
It's annoying for us, but for him, it's this wonderful moment. So I took that as sort of this inspiration for the title and the character, who was not really inspired by my dad so much, but just that one line. The character came, you pull things from real life, actual choir directors you knew and other people you knew and a lot of the imagined stuff. And those two characters came together and became the basis for the story. And then the other characters appeared as they were telling me the story. So that's how it came to be.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, I think you've already sort of told us, but I thought maybe you could give us a little more. But I always wonder when I meet writers who are also editors, which came first. It sounds like you were an editor first, and then you decided to write. But when you were younger, did you want to be a writer, and then you fell into editing? How did that all happen for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a writer as a kid. I mean, we all have the dreams, well, not all of us. But if you're any kind of a bookish person, and I read tons of books growing up, you kind of want to write. I remember in high school, especially, I was writing for one of the honors English classes or something, and I wrote a story that was basically a ripoff of the first few chapters of one of the Lord of the Rings stories. And that was, we start by emulating what we like to read. That's how that began. And I had dreams early on of being a successful published author, and I maintained those dreams for a long time. However, life goes on, and there's a lot of hard work involved in that, and you sort of set the dream aside, like, well, maybe I'll get to that later, because you have to do your life. And other people can find
we do have to
motivation
eat.
to do it. I chose other things. There is that, yes. It's hard to eat paper. So I had the dream all along. I wrote here and there short stories. I had some blogs and things that I would do where I would write, but never really tried to seriously write a novel for a long time. And then I thought, well, maybe I should do this for real. And at that time, I'd already been an editor for a while. I got into editing, and I was doing that, learning that on the job too. Even that I didn't have training for, but I learned it. And as I became an editor, I started to learn how stories and words were put together that made more sense. And so I sat down and started to write some books. And the first couple of attempts were pretty awful. And I knew it, but I did it anyway. And then the third one, I sat down and I thought, well, what if I told the truth instead of just trying to write a story? And that's a different perspective that made me wake up and say, well, okay, what does that look like? How do you tell the truth in a novel? And that was sort of the turning point for me. I wrote a novel sort of following some aspect of truth and emotional story of relationships that weren't working and all these kinds of, and I didn't do anything with that. I set it aside. It wasn't good enough for that, but it did teach me a little bit about how to tell a story, because as I've learned and often tell my writers that as a fiction writer, you have to tell the truth. You have to make something believable. As a nonfiction writer, you can just say whatever you want. You don't have to tell the truth. And it's kind of ironic, but that's just the way it is. For a story to be believable, it has to feel and resonate as truth to you as the reader.
Yeah, otherwise you can't get the reader to suspend their disbelief. So like I write paranormals, and I make sure that the normal part, the real part, is as real as possible down to the burrito, because that makes it so much easier to suspend your disbelief and go, wow, well, maybe werewolves do live in Sedona. So.
Yeah. Well, it really is about consistency of the world you create. If you're doing anything in the fantastical realm, you need to create a rule system that works from beginning to end and is consistent within itself and has costs for things. I mean, I work with a lot of authors who write fantasy novels, and one of the biggest comments that I make, most common comments, is, what's the cost for this magical power that this person is using? Is there's no cost, then you might as well write the whole book in one sentence. The hero wins, the end. Because there's no stakes, and if there are no stakes, no one cares. So that's true in all fiction, but I think especially in sort of the supernatural kinds of fiction.
Yeah, for sure. And, I was super lucky, and I got to meet Ray Bradbury a couple times before he passed away. And he used to always say that writing, because he dabbled in painting, poetry, playwriting, he did everything. But he used to say that being a writer, a novel writer, was like the hardest thing in the world as far as the arts go, because he said, I did my first painting and I would have never tried to sell it. And he said, but because they teach us in elementary school to write a complete sentence, and we write a whole bunch of complete sentences and type the end, we think we did it, we wrote a book, let's get it published. And he said, and you're not a storyteller yet. And that really resonated with me, because it's true. You have to write tons of just before you figure out how to be a storyteller. It's different than being able to be a writer. They teach us in school to write, but to tell a story, they don't teach us that. They teach us to write term papers, So
Exactly.
What you were saying about figuring out how to be a storyteller it's a whole different set of tools, I think.
Yeah, and that's, my role as an editor when I play that role, which is most of the time, is to help writers discover that. And, I'm not just helping, I'm not so much a detail-minded editor. I'm not doing copy editing. I'm doing the big picture stuff. So it's all developmental, line editing to a degree as well. But that's all about helping the writer to see what works, what doesn't. Does this character seem real? Is this action that's happening believable? All of those things are really about storytelling. So they can write great sentences, and I've read some great books that are beautifully written that really don't tell much of a story.
Right.
And I've read some great stories that have poorly written, in terms of the writing skills. They weren't there, but the stories are brilliant. And so there's going to be, I think, a market, and I hate that word because it's obviously we're turning into a commodity now, but that's what it is to a degree. Some of those stories that are poorly written but have great stories sell a ton. So it's not necessarily that you have to be the greatest writer in the world, but you do have to be a good storyteller. And I'm glad you mentioned Ray Bradbury. That's my very favorite compliment that I've ever gotten from anybody was a friend of mine, Jenny Lawson, who's an author of her own, quite successful in nonfiction to write humor. She's the bloggess online. She once said, my favorite authors are Steve Parolini and Ray Bradbury. Now, this is a one-time thing. She was just talking to me, so it could have been a one-off. But that was that's where I want to be.
Yeah,
that's the kind of storyteller I'd like to be. So that's a nice connection.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
I don't claim that skill, but I certainly like that compliment. It was nice to hear.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. If you were going to be compared to anyone, Ray Bradbury, that's not bad.
I obviously read tons myself, so there may be some influences just coming from having read, because I think you do take on some of the traits of the authors that you read. That's normal. I think that's true in all the arts. We start by copying, and then eventually we learn our own style if we keep working at it and allowing our own selves to get into what we're doing, infuse itself into what we're doing. whether that's painting or music or writing.
Right. Yeah, because you get someone who inspires you and you kind of emulate them until you find your own voice, and that takes a while.
It does. Yeah,
So,
the voice thing, some people get it right away and others it takes years.
Yeah, so true. And when you were on your, obviously your writing journey, you kind of detoured off into editing, but when you decided, okay, I'm going to write a book and self-publish it or try to traditionally publish, what did your journey look like? Because you're an editor, so I know other writers like me, we picture that obviously you wrote a perfect draft because you're an editor. But what did the journey look like for you? Did you get other input?
Well, I wrote a perfect draft, and it was all done in just a matter of days. Actually, reality is it took about 3 years to write the last 2 books. Yeah, if only it were that true. As an editor, I was encouraged, and most people would say the same thing. Most writer teachers or writer consultants would say, write the book, get it done. Don't worry how horrible it is. It's supposed to be horrible. Your first draft is just getting it on the page. If there's nothing on the page, you can't edit it, and that's true. And I encourage writers to do that, and it really helps to feel like you've accomplished something. You've got a book. It's done. There's 80,000 words, and they're on the page. They may be all horrible, but at least it's there. I don't do that myself. I'd like to be able to, but I don't. I edit as I write. So, I may revisit the same chapter 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 times as I'm working on it just to make sure it's right. And that's not a necessarily healthy or efficient way to write. That's just the way I do it. So if that's the way you write and it works for you, I say go for it. But in general, I would recommend you just write the book, get it done, then go back and put on the editor's hat and try to make it better.
Right. So when you are not writing and editing, I always ask people because we're stuck inside during the pandemic, are there things that you like to binge watch on TV, or do you binge read? What do you do?
I don't binge read as much as I'd like to. I'd like to read, and the irony of this current situation is I used to read during all my lunch breaks. I'd go work at a Starbucks or at a coffee shop somewhere, and then go to lunch, take an hour or two, and read. That's where I read for fun. I read anything that I can get my hands on that's interesting. And so I get most of my reading done during lunch hours. And now I don't have that because I'm here staying at home with my granddaughter all the time. We don't have lunch breaks. We do it together. So the reading is trickier. I watch lots of stuff. Late at night when granddaughter's in bed, I'll watch a show or two. And I don't know what I've been watching lately. I try to watch a little bit of everything, just see what's out there. I like the variety. I like good stories. I don't care about the genre. That's true with music too. I love music, so it's whatever song sounds good to me is perfectly fine. It doesn't have to fit a mold. So I try to, diversity is key for me. And I do that with my editing too. I edit a variety of kinds of books. I choose to work with authors who have everything from literary kinds of fiction to women's fiction to science fiction to fantasy to paranormal, whatever, historical. And I like that variety. It keeps my brain active and interested in what I'm doing.
That's so cool. Do you ever take on a project and then think, okay, this is a little out of my comfort zone? Do you do that to yourself on purpose? I've
done it on purpose a couple of times, but always in those cases it's been because the book is so good. I've done plenty of work with first-time authors, and I'm happy to work with them because I know that they're still trying to figure out who they are and what this whole thing is, this writing thing. And in that case, I may do a lot more notes, make a lot more notes in the margins of those, offer a lot more teaching to the first-timers. But when I find something that's really well written, I sometimes wonder, and I think all have this, is that imposter syndrome. Like, do I really know what I'm doing? And can I do this? Am I an editor? and I take on some of those because I want to stretch myself. I want to see what more I can find in this great work of fiction to make it better, and I usually do. I think there were a couple times in my almost 30-year career of this where I've taken on a project where I just wish I hadn't. And that early on, you take on whatever you can because you have to pay the bills. I'm fortunate now that I can kind of pick and choose those that come to me and say, will you work with me? I'll consider yes or no. I don't have to do as much now as I used to. So I'm more picky now, but I still pick a variety, and I still pick lots of first-time authors because I like that coaching element of the job as editor.
Right. And I wondered, too, about audiobooks. Do you listen to audiobooks? Because I found during this pandemic, I can only watch so much, binge watching of shows, and I write, so I'm sitting. So whenever I'm doing anything standing up, like folding laundry or shower or whatever, I have audiobooks going. And so I've been getting a lot of my reading done listening to audiobooks. Do you enjoy audiobooks? Have you tried that out yet?
I haven't, and one of the reasons is because I was reading plenty, in my Kindle or whatever. I would take that wherever I go.
Right.
And now, since I've had my granddaughter here full time, it's been 4 years now, but taking care of her. That when I'm home, my attention has to be at least partly available to her, mostly available to her most of the time because she's just here.
Right.
With no school now, it's like good luck listening to anything because you have to. I don't want to be on their headphones or anything like that when she's around. So, yeah, most of my time is spent, playing with Legos and answering questions. Because there's 1,000 questions.
How old is your granddaughter?
She's 8, and she's actually in book 5 now of the Harry Potter series. She's quite a reader. We've been reading it together, and now she's reading it pretty much on her own, and that's a tough one. That gets harder once you get that giant book 5. So, but she tells me about it. It's like, Papa, come here. This last night I got this call. I was in the other room. I said, what is it now? Is there a nightmare? She was reading it in her bed.
Right.
Came in and said, guess what? Ron is a prefect. So, she's excited about these little story elements. And she's a great reader, and she wants to be, I think she'll do some writing too. She's a good little writer and a musician and all the arts. I'm encouraging those. So that's where my time goes during the day. And at the end of the day, if I edited it all during the middle of that, there's just no energy left. It takes a certain amount of creative energy to do parenting, obviously, but also the editing work that I do. And I think I run out by the end of the day. So I'm looking forward to a day when we have school again and I can use that time for the work, and then I'll have enough mental and emotional energy to do more writing.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. My daughter is grown now, but she used to be, and she still is, a big reader. And I can recall one night I went up to check and see that she was asleep, and she had a tiny flashlight under her blanket. She was reading one of those, there was a series back then of diaries of girls who, they were fictional, but it was, the diary of Cleopatra's sister and the diary of somebody who was on the Titanic and all that. And she was reading the Titanic one at the time, and I opened the door and I said, "It is way past bedtime. You need to put that book away." And she says, "Okay, sorry, Mama." I said, "If I come back and I see you reading that book, you're gonna lose TV." And she goes, and I start to close the door, and she goes, "Mama?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "How long would I lose TV?" I'm like, "Okay, give me the book."
It's like, wait a minute. Parenting backwards is what that is. What?
Right,
You're going to lose TV.
And she's funny. Like, "Well, how long would I lose it?" That book was really good, apparently. She was right near the end. So we are rapidly running out of time, and I just wanted to know how can readers get in touch with you? If they read Beautiful Sky, and they want to know what's coming next from you, do you have a newsletter? Are you on social media? How can they get in touch with you?
I don't have a newsletter. I am on social media. I'm on Twitter at Novel Doctor. And all of the information is available at the steveparolini.com website or noveldoctor.com. They're all connected.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here today. It was great chatting with you, and good luck getting through this pandemic. I know people with school-age children, this has been a huge challenge, so kudos to you.
Well, thank you, and it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, and we will talk to you soon. Good luck on that next book.
Thanks for joining us on Booklights. Be sure to connect with us at www.readersentertainment.com for articles, blogs, videos, and podcasts that matter to readers.
The Hollywood Reporter is your ultimate source for awards race news this fall. Go to THR.com to keep up with this award season's expert predictions from executive editor Scott Feinberg, and tune into the Hollywood Reporter's Awards Chatter podcast for exclusive interviews with the biggest names in showbiz. Stay in the loop with daily newsletters providing real-time updates on all the awards action. Subscribe to THR.com for full access to the Hollywood Reporter and never miss a moment of this fall awards season. Visit THR.com today.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woo-hooer, a hand clapper, a high-fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.